Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settled in, and begin. The night I planned to kill my husband, things went terribly, terribly wrong. The kids and I are still on the run. Please, send help. I heard a faint beep and the click of a keycard registering at the lock. I figured they must have had a hell of a time. Their laughter reverberated down the hall long before they arrived at the room. The woman sauntered in, giggling, kicked off her heels, then strode across the low-pile carpet and opened the mini fridge. I heard the shrill squeak of styrofoam when she placed it inside, probably leftovers from dinner. It smelled like Mexican. Enchiladas, maybe, or chile relleno. That was Tom's favorite, the bastard. I watched their feet move closer until they were standing in front of one another. Tom's size 13s were still on. Fucking clown shoes. The woman rose to her tippy toes, and I could hear their lips smacking against one another's. Heat rose in my face, to the point I thought my head might pop like one of those cartoon thermometers. I reached for the kitchen knife I had brought from home and held it over my heart, hands trembling. This was it. This was my moment. I tried moving my legs and arms, stretching, preparing for the physical undertaking ahead. Tom was a big guy. If I didn't do this exactly as planned, precisely as I had practiced, things would go south for me. Fast. My joints ached as I moved them back and forth. I had been hiding beneath this god-forsaken bed for hours. Clothes rained onto the floor where, in my head, I had planned to slide out and pounce on him, plunging my blade through his thick neck. The woman's feet levitated from the floor and then disappeared. She giggled more, the tramp, then the bed caved to the point of just grazing the tip of my nose when he threw her on top of it. Tom's feet disappeared, one by one, as he mounted the mattress. I noticed the heat had left my face. I was so angry a moment ago, but I noticed now. I was feeling something different. My vision blurred, and tears ran down both sides of my face as the bed creaked above me. I left the knife on my chest and wiped my tears away. I hated myself for crying. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was the bastard that was supposed to pay today. Pay for the countless nights of phony meetings, just too far out of town to come home for the night. This scenario had played out in my head countless times. I knew where to stick the knife, the precise angle, what I would say to the bitch as she ran screaming out the door, mascara running and tits flopping down the hall, pleading for housekeeping to save her life. And I knew this would be the end of the line for me. He would be dead, and I would go to prison, finally free of his lies. The tears were unstoppable now. I thought about Ryan and Hannah, and what this would do to them. I told myself they would be fine. My sister would take them in. She was strong. She didn't let men walk all over her, lie to her, treat her like a used sack. She had a good husband. They would care for the kids. Plus, they were nearly through high school. They had their own lives now. They didn't need me anymore, and they surely didn't need their lying father. I grabbed the knife from my chest and gripped it tight as I could. If I wanted to do this right, I couldn't let this knife get out of my hands. But the knife shook so much, I could hardly maintain my grip. I dropped it on the floor beside me and the handle thudded against the carpet. I froze, wondering if they might have heard, but the bed kept on swaying and creaking. I felt around for the knife at my side, and once I got my hand on it, I couldn't pick it up. The sanity band in my mind's balance scale plummeted, and I realized I didn't recognize the woman I had become. Was I really going to go through with this? Was I going to throw my life away for this piece of shit? Cupped my hands over my mouth to stifle the cries beckoning at my quivering lips. This wasn't me. I'm no murderer. I'm a mother. I was head of the PTA, for God's sake. My mind did a complete backflip, and I began brainstorming how I could most quickly get out of this shitty hotel room. Finally, all the weight of the past few weeks, all the preparation, all the espionage, and thinking I would grow old in prison, it all drifted away. The woman began panting heavily, then screamed passionately, "Fuck, I should not be hearing this. Why did I do this to myself?" Suddenly, she stopped mid-scream. Guttural smacks and clicks came from deep within her throat, and the smooth sway of the bed was replaced by feverish shaking and thumping on the mattress. I tried to process what could be happening to her. Was she having a heart attack? No. Tom wasn't that good, the bastard. Finally, the shaking stopped. The room fell quiet, and I could hear my blood pumping, so loud I feared they might hear it too. The bed shifted as someone slid across. Then the woman's body flopped to the floor. She laid next to me, staring wide-eyed. The silhouette of fat, purple fingers painted her neck. Something I had never thought about before was that death could look fresh. Although she wasn't breathing, there was a faint light still living somewhere within her. I imagined if someone resuscitated her quick, she might make it. Two bare size 13s pounded the floor on either side of her body, and I recoiled, my brain finally catching up with the events. Tom dropped to his knees, and for a moment, I thought he might bend all the way down and crane his head beneath the bed to say hello, but he didn't. He knocked the woman's clutch from the nightstand onto the floor, sending its contents flying. Tom grabbed a tube of lipstick. He pinched the woman's chin between his fingers, puckering her lips, and delicately applied the bright red lipstick with perfect precision. He then tidied up her eyeshadow, wiping a wayward smudge from the side of her face with his pinky. Then Tom stood and grabbed her by the ankles. I watched as her body slid across the floor and into the bathroom, a captive audience to this one-man show that I feared may have been a rerun. I swear her dead eyes somehow never left mine, locked on, like she was still somewhere in there, begging for me to jump in with my kitchen knife and carry out my plan. Then the bathroom door slammed shut. Maybe I should run, I thought, now, straight out the door. But what if he returned right as I slid out from under the bed? I didn't want to end up like her. Then I thought about Ryan and Hannah. They don't know what he is. Shit, I don't know what he is. He could hurt them too, but he wouldn't. Would he? I let out a deep breath and resolved to stay put. I would wait until morning if I had to, until he left to dispose of the body. Whatever he did, whatever else I saw, here, in this room, tonight, I had to wait it out. I had to get home to my babies. A woman entered our police station at 3:23 a.m. and begged to be arrested. "What crime have you committed?" I asked. "None," she choked out, lungs recovering from her dash into the station. I frowned from behind the counter, readying myself for one of those nights, but it would be like no other night of my life. "Then why should I arrest you, ma'am?" The squirrely woman, catching her breath with hands against her knees, cranked her neck backwards so sharply that the joint popped. Because, she said, taking a big inhale, we're all in danger. Then her eyes began to ping frenetically between the station's entrance and me. I leant my elbows a little more deeply into the counter, pushing forwards to take a better peek at the building's automatic doors. There was nothing beyond the glass panes but the black of night and tarmac and silhouetted trees. Is somebody following you? I asked. She shook her bobblehead, making her neck pop another couple of times. I winced a little at the woman's frailty. She was slinging her skull around so violently that I started to wonder whether she wanted to launch it free. Pitch the damn thing for 6. No, I'm just checking, she whispered, coming closer. That we're alone. Now, I'm an officer of the law. I've faced men and women with twice and thrice the stature of this meek, frightened woman. So I don't know quite how to explain how or why I felt such terror in that moment. I was chilled by the woman's breath, or the words carried on it. There are 3 other officers at the station tonight, I croaked before clearing my throat. We're not alone. Will those doors count? She asked, shivering as she eyed the glass entrance again. Count in what way? I replied. I need the smallest indoor space possible, she said. He told me that I won't be able to exit a room or a building or a prison without spoken approval. He said I'd need permission to leave. Who told you that? I asked, befuddled. I don't understand, ma'am. Explain what's happening. Do I have to do something criminal? The woman asked, shuddering. You won't just arrest me. That's generally how it works, I replied. I'm just a little concerned about why you want to be locked away this evening. Well, morning. I assume it has something to do with keeping yourself safe by getting off the street, given that you say you're in danger. However, jail cells aren't hotel rooms, so I don't need to protect myself, she interjected with a hiss, wild eyes locking onto mine. I need to protect all of you. What's happening out here, Thatcher? Officer Bowen asked as she emerged from the office behind me. I tried my damnedest not to gulp, but the unnerving woman was making it difficult for me. This lady is asking to be arrested, but she says she hasn't committed a crime. Officer, Bowen offered me a raised eyebrow, then put her hands on her hips as she looked at the woman. What's your name, love? Tamsin, she said. Please, will one of you lock me up? I need to be locked up. Something bad's about to happen. What's about to happen, Tamsin? Asked Officer Bowen. I don't know. The woman blubbered, placing her face in her hands. It's inside me. Something about those words and her tone of voice instilled me with fear beyond anything words could describe. For it was a fear, not of this world. Officer Bowen, on the other hand, seemed unamused. She leant towards my ear and whispered, I think we need to get this lady some psychiatric help. She might be in danger, I whispered back as Tamsin continued to cry. She might be, Officer Bowen agreed. But that's for a healthcare professional to decide, don't you think? Not 2 police officers at 3 o'clock in the morning. I nodded, then spoke louder. Tamsin, I'm going to leave you with Officer Bowen for a second, whilst I make a call in the office. Okay. Tamsin shot her head up from her hands as I rose from the swivel chair. No, please. Just arrest me. There isn't time for any of this. I need you to relax, Tamsin, Bowen said, as I started to walk towards the office. We're going to help you, okay? We're going to figure out what's happening. Together. I shut the office door behind me. then made the call. The idea was to avoid potentially upsetting or aggravating the distressed civilian. Bowen and I had no idea how she would react to the arrival of a mental health specialist, so it seemed best to keep that information to ourselves. The office overlooked the main entrance through a horizontal one-way window, so I watched Bowen and Tamsin talk whilst the phone rang, and when I made it through to a specialist, I explained the whole situation to her. She said that Tamsin was in need of a proper health assessment. "I know it's late," I said, "so I'm happy to escort her to the hospital." And then came a voice not quite her own. "No, we'll escort you all," before I managed to wrap my head around my unease at her sudden shift in vocal timbre. I clocked Tamsin smiling at me from the other side of the one-way window. She shouldn't have been able to see me, but I knew somehow that she could, and that filled me with terror. The grin on her face might have had a thing to do with it too. Then the lights in the station cut out, and that came with a sharper pang of terror. The pain persisted afterwards, leaving me sitting in the dark, phone screen lighting my face, with an invisible blade lodged stubbornly between two bars of my ribcage. With the phone in my far from rigid hand, I rushed back out into the darkened area behind the counter, but Officer Bowen wasn't there, and when I shone my phone's torch beyond the counter, Tamsin wasn't there either. "Hello," yelled a voice from down the corridor, as fear started to grip me more tightly. A torchlight bounced down a distant corridor beyond the counter, painting the walls in light, offering only a slight reprieve from the suffocating darkness. Then came Officer Harling into the entryway. "Oh, Thatcher, thank God someone's here," he sighed, shining the torch beam onto me. "Looks like we've had a power cut." "There was a woman," I whispered, leaning against the counter, once again, this time for emotional support. I was terrified, and I still wasn't quite sure why. "She's gone now. Bowen's gone too." "Huh?" Harling asked, not catching my drift. "Gone? I don't know." "Where's Rodman?" I asked. Harling shrugged. "You're the first person I've found. Maybe we should check the fuse box or call." He was interrupted by screaming, the voices of a man and a woman, from deeper within the station. "Bowen," I whispered. "Rodman," he added. I ran out from behind the counter and joined Officer Harling as we ran down a hallway that led into the heart of the station, desperate to locate the cries of our two fellow officers on the late-night shift with us. "This is Officer Harling," he panted as we ran down the corridor. "Requesting backup. Power cut at the station and potential disturbance." "Roger," came a garbled voice from the other end of his radio. We burst through double doors and found ourselves in the station's break room. There, we witnessed a horror I will never forget. Officer Bowen and Officer Rodman were both lying on one of the tables, sawn neatly in half a little above each of their pelvic areas. The light of Harling's torch caught the sheen of the blood, and the table's laminated plastic top, and the whites of the victim's eyes. Their mouths hung open in the screams they had unleashed during those final seconds of life. I hoped, and still hope, their deaths were swift and relatively painless, but their expressions told another horrifying story, one that left me paralyzed in fear, vocal cords unable to expel a sound. Harling, on the other hand, screamed and rushed towards our severed officers, dropping his torch to the floor as he ran, plunging us back into darkness. I'd seen something for a moment at the back of the room. "Harling, pick the torch up," I begged, rummaging in my pocket for my phone. "They're gone." Harling sobbed, no longer the sturdy officer of the law I had known for 5 years, but a weeping mess. "Pick it up now, Harling," I insisted. I was a mess too, a jittery, terrified one. It wasn't sturdiness that kept me awake and alert. Wasn't my duty to the law. I need Harling to pick up his torch, because we weren't alone in that room. There came the slaps of flesh against the floor, and I hurriedly activated my phones. Torch. Harling was gone. "Hello," I wheezed feebly, casting the torch around the room. "Whoever's in here, reinforcements are on the way, so—" "Roger," crackled a distorted voice from some unseen radio. "We'll escort you all." My stomach dropped as I realized that Harling's call hadn't made it through to anyone. That voice, inhuman and indistinct, did not belong to anyone or anything that wanted to help. It belonged to the voice I'd heard when I called the mental health care professional. There came more slaps from behind me, only a few, and when I spun my torch around, I expected to find nothing there once again. So I screamed when I saw her. Tamsin. Only she had changed. She showed only the whites of her eyes, rolling them ever deeper into the back of her head, and her mouth was impossible. It spanned the breadth of her face, and then some. It had opened beyond human limits. And to add to that hellishness, it revealed not human teeth, but incisors of obscene length, narrow width. Each tip tapered off to the finest point, which dripped with blood, and even the canines and molars to the sides were unthinkably sharp, unthinkably capable of cleaving a creature neatly down its center. "Do you want me to stay, officer?" The thing cooed as if playing with its food. Then it charged towards me, and I screamed at a volume louder than my lungs were built to accommodate. Screamed as I braced for death. Screamed, "No!" Time feels a little hazy between that moment, which I expected to be my last, and the moment at which the responding officers found me. They said they'd arrived in 20 minutes, but it may as well have been hours, or perhaps only seconds. But she was gone when they got there and returned power to the building. I was interrogated about the demise of my fellow officers, including the disappearance of Officer Harling, who is a suspect in the case, along with Tamsin, the mystery woman, visible on CCTV footage before the blackout. "The discrepancy between your story and the truth is curious," said one interviewer. "What discrepancy?" I asked. "Well, the power to the building was undoubtedly cut," he explained. "Yet the automatic doors were standing open when backup officers arrived at the station. I felt my skin pale. He said I'd need permission to leave. I found her in their house. Like everyone else, I'd seen it in the headlines. 17-year-old girl still missing. Jasmine showed up to school only once after news of her sister broke, but by second period she'd vanished. It reminded me of last year when her mother had taken that terrible fall down the stairs. She'd hidden then too, like she was trying to hide from the pain itself. I ditched class and found her crouched by the school courtyard fountain, tears streaking her face. Without thinking, I handed her a tissue and let her lean on my shoulder until she calmed down. Gently, I put an arm around her. "I know this is hell for you and your dad." She jerked away. "Don't you dare speak like you know him." "What? Did I say something bad?" "No." She shrank into herself. "It's just, you have no idea what my home life is like. Dad's different." No, I'd never faced loss that sharp. But I remembered my grandpa after his second wife passed. He taught me coin tricks, like weaving them through my fingers, but when I tried to cheer him up, he snapped and called it a stupid waste of money. I don't think anyone handles this sort of thing well. And after your mom, too. He's only human. Sometimes, she whispered. I don't think he is. She let her words hang in the air. I didn't hear from her for 3 weeks after that. It was June, and our mid-year assessments were fast approaching. I was cramming for an AP mathematics test when my phone chimed. Where do we stand? She texted. In all our conversations, she'd never been so blunt. But I understood. When life's chaotic, you grasp for anything stable, figuring out which relationships matter most. I took a deep breath and replied, I want something serious, a real relationship. I get it if you need to put things on hold, though. 3 dots wobbled on my screen for several minutes before she finally wrote back, let's talk things out at mine. I'll be there tonight, I texted. I slipped on a collared shirt, slim jeans, and cleaned the car in case we drove anywhere. She liked going for long drives in the dark, where we could talk our feelings through without looking eye to eye. My phone dinged right as I pulled up out front of her house, and I pictured her waiting for me by the window. But instead, she texted, running late on errands. Keys are under the pot plant. Let yourself in. I twisted the handle and stepped inside. The lights were all on, but the house felt empty, sterile, like a show home for real estate. A chemical smell like bleach or dishwasher liquid clung to the air. Family photos framed the hallway. Jasmine, her missing sister Serena, and their dad, Isaiah. Only one photo showed their mother. Isaiah had taken down all photos of her after the accident, and now there were just faint outlines where frames once hung. My phone buzzed again. Which room are you in? I thought that was strange. Maybe she was worried about me snooping. I just walked in, I texted back. Okay, wait in the living room. Suddenly, a slow, wet thud thumped above me. Something heavy, like bowling balls rolling off a shelf. Her dad shouldn't have been home. He worked night shifts, but something about it drew me to investigate. I climbed the stairs. Hello. With each step, the thrashing grew more insistent. Then I identified the sound. Shoes. Shoes that were pushing against the floor like somebody was trying to stand up on a slippery surface. There was a smell, too. A tangy, acidic smell. Like someone had forgotten to flush the toilet in summer. I pinched my nose, but once the smell was inside, it didn't leave. At the landing, I followed it to a bedroom door. The latch had caught improperly, and the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Serena lay handcuffed to the bed, socks and duct tape gagging her mouth. Her skin was pale, eyes wide. When she saw me, her fingers twitched and her mouth bit at the restraints. The floor beneath her and her dress were stained with bodily waste no one had bothered to clean. She thrashed harder against the restraints. Holy shit, are you okay? I stammered. Then the question hit me. If Serena had been missing for weeks, what was she doing here? Do you know where the keys are? I searched the room, but found no keys. The cuffs were locked to a wooden banister. I considered kicking the beam to break it, but before I could act, every light died. A door slammed below, and heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. I darted into the closet just as the intruder appeared. In the closet were supplies, duct tape, zip ties, bleach, and a packet of medical scalpels. He paused inside the darkened room, sniffing the air like an animal, narrow-shouldered and corded with muscle. There was something uncanny about him I couldn't place until he turned, and I could barely make out his face. Isaiah, her father. He ripped the tape from Serena's mouth. "Where is he?" he demanded. When she shook her head, he struck her across the temple. "He brought outside filth to your sister. Her shape didn't hold. It tore. Only his blood can make amends." He reset the gag and pulled out his phone. The glow from the screen, the only light in the room, it lit up his face more clearly, and I now saw his eyes. They were rolled back in his head and twitching, like something was pulling from inside. Hanging from his jaw was a bumpy sheet of dangling flesh, like a turkey blistered with red warts. My own phone buzzed in my pocket, Jasmine's face on the caller ID. Isaiah strained to listen. Thankfully, my phone had been on silent and only buzzed softly. Unsuccessful, he reached for a spray bottle on the bedside counter. Serena struggled. "Did he touch you?" He misted the spray in the air. "We'll need to start the process over if your skin is to be of any use to us." Serena attempted one final protest. Isaiah ignored her and sprayed the contents into her face. She screamed again, writhing in the cuffs like a dying bug. There was something in the air, a biting chlorine smell. Bleach. When he spoke this time, his voice was not his own, but that of Jasmine's. "One last time. Where is the boy who defiled the girl?" Tears in her eyes, blinking against the sting of bleach. Serena lifted her head. My chest constricted. This was it. I never should have come here. I'd felt something was off from the moment I stepped inside the house. But instead she grunted softly and nodded toward the bed's underside. Isaiah dropped to his hands and knees. As he peered underneath, she flicked her eyes at me and mouthed one word: "Run." Guilt roiled in my stomach, but I swallowed it and bolted from the closet. Isaiah jerked his head up too quickly and struck the bed frame. As he was recovering, Serena managed to kick his leg out from under him. In the precious few seconds that moment bought me, I dove down the stairs and into the night. My pulse hammered in my throat, my legs were numb, and I didn't realize how fast I'd been running until I stopped to catch my breath. When I did, I heaved the contents of my lunch onto the asphalt. I didn't see Isaiah anywhere on the street, so I took out my phone and called the police. When the blue and red lights flashed down the road, I felt safe enough to creep out of my hiding place and meet them as they stepped out of the car. "Stay here," they ordered. I intended to do just that, but before I knew it, I was pacing up to the front window and peering inside. Their flashlights swept the floor. One hovered back to a pile of pink clothes folded on the living room floor. They hadn't been there before. The officer stepped closer, the light intensifying on the pink mass. Only then did I see it for what it was. Flabby folds of skin, a flesh suit turned inside out. There was blood and juice and hair, but no bones, nothing solid. It could have been worn like a coat. I wondered if they'd find Serena in the same state, like she'd been unzipped. It stirred my belly and I backed away before I could analyze the scene anymore. They finished the sweep and met me outside. One of the officers, Ike, kept showing me a photo of Isaiah on his phone. "Are you sure it was him? The preacher? Her father did this?" All I could muster was, "Did you find anything in Jasmine's room?" Officer Ike winced at that. "The pillow has been submitted into evidence. and we won't know for sure until we get a DNA result from the blood, but he struggled with the next word. I'm not gonna lie to you, kid. It's unlikely anything good happened to her. It could have been anyone's blood, I protested, but I didn't believe it myself. Jasmine's words echoed in my head. You have no idea what my home life is like. Ike smiled apologetically. The blood is several weeks old. When was the last time you heard from Jasmine? In person, I mean. 3 weeks ago, I said flatly. He patted my shoulder. Would you mind showing me the text messages? It can wait if you need time to recollect yourself. No, I said. Let's get it done now. I removed my phone from my pocket, and that's when I noticed a new message from Jasmine. Don't. Wait up. I'll find you. Something tapped on my door in the Arctic wastes. Hello, my name's Cole. That's not my real name, and it's probably a pretty bad idea to post this, but I'm sending it to a friend of mine so he can post it on his account. All that might ease my trail a bit. They're talking about shipping me out on another assignment, so if I disappear, I want someone to be able to confirm this is real, say my real name, and tell the name of the company I work or worked for. I'm from Canada, Ontario. To be a bit more specific, you all don't need my life's story, and giving it would be a bit more identifying than need be. I'll say this, I'm in my late 20s. I used to be a roughneck on an oil rig, and I caused a major accident. I won't go into detail, but I'll just say my mistake caused a top drive to snap, and I was very lucky I only caused the near $1 million of damage I did, instead of getting someone killed. After some tense negotiations and the concerning excitement someone in upper management showed when they found out I didn't have a wife and kids, I was given a choice: face prosecution and blacklisting from work, or take a special job for a couple years to pay off my debt. I chose the latter. I signed some Bible-thick stacks of paperwork, and eventually I was set in a van, then a truck, and finally a boat, on my way to a remote island in Nunavut. When I got to the dock, a tall man with a strong Newfoundland accent greeted me. He flew his arm out to shake mine tensely and quickly. I turned around to see the man who'd driven me through the Arctic Sea, quickly turning his boat around and sailing away. I heard my new friend chuckle in a slow, dark manner behind me. Right, some cold, AB. What is this place? Hell if I know. He turned around there on the spot, and I followed him into the station, setting my bag down at the entrance. I was pretty surprised when I walked in. I was expecting something a lot more advanced or unique, but it just looked like they'd cut out a room from the oil rig and set it right here in the Arctic Circle. There was machinery in the middle that looked like some sort of small-scale drill or pump. Not really sure. Again, basic, although, as my eyes were adjusting to the dim light of the room, I could swear the hole the machine was drilling into was giving off some odd rich glow. My friend didn't seem to care about my interest in my new surroundings. He just jumped right into showing me how to work. I tried to engage him with pleasantries. Where are you from? How'd you end up here? How long have you been here? Every time he'd ignore me and go back to showing me my daily tasks. Finally, while he was explaining some manual labor, I asked him one more question. Yeah, listen. Be very simple like. Just take this here card, replace these purple filters in this machine here, and then write the number on this gauge in that terminal. Simple, eh? He was referring to an odd machine, whose shape might be compared to a circulatory system. One large block in the middle with a few dials with lots of gauges, a slot for the filters he was talking about, and then at least 100 thin tubes attached to it. He swatted a few of them to show me they weren't fragile. I would also like to note that I'm heavily tuning down his accent so it's readable. Yeah, no problem. So, and like I was showing you, you can move these wires or tubes or whatever they is, but don't haul off and rip 'em. The scientist fella won't be happy. Got it? Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. So, listen. What's your name? He paused. Every other question just got a quick smirk, and then silence. But he actually replied after a tense wait. You can call me Doyle. Is that your real name? No. I didn't ask him much for the rest of the evening. It was starting to get dark, and then a tall man who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight, a meal, or any sleep for months scurried into a room Doyle was explaining to me. Oh, hello. Who are you? He was clearly paranoid. Calm down, B. He's a new roughneck. Though I suppose the title's not official. My second co-worker was still looking me up and down and scanning my face. It was very disconcerting. Doyle, where did he come from? Did you see him come off the dock? Do you remember seeing him come off the dock? Yeah, I did. Don't worry so much. If it was anything like that, I'd have dealt with it. Besides, it's never happened yet. I saw him slowly force himself to loosen up, and then he actually looked bashful. Sorry. This place gets to you after a while. Doyle cut in. Wouldn't if you'd get some sun like I keep telling you. Hey, B. The other man ignored him. He reached his arm out and we shook hands. My name's Lucas. I'm this base's researcher. Sorry for being so discerning, but it's better than being careless. My name's Cole and you're all right. Worried about spies or something? Spies? He started laughing in a loud and wild manner. I saw Doyle shuffle out of the room from the corner of my eye. He signaled a pack of cigarettes at us. No. Spies would be fun. That would be a welcome change. I think Lucas caught himself and his odd behavior by the nervous look I was giving him. Sorry, I didn't mean to freak you out. I was Sorry, never mind. He shuffled off and started writing down some numbers on some other machinery in that room. After a few minutes, I decided to venture some questions on him. May I ask what this place is? And what are we even doing here? Ah, yes. I'm sure Doyle is giving you his regular silent treatment. He never quits doing that, you know. But he's a good man. Don't get me wrong. I have no idea why they put him here, really. And every time I've tried to ask him about it, he just smiles in that odd way he always does. Really, I don't. Lucas seemed to barely be attached to our conversation and was just enjoying that someone was here who he could actually talk to. He went on rambling about life there at the base for 2 hours as I followed him, collecting his data in his notes across the base, in between filler conversation and stem muttering, the kind of stem talk that gives you the impression the person is trying to show off their knowledge. I learned a bit about him and about the base. I asked him why he was there. He vaguely hinted that it was government work, and that if he makes some advances in his work, he'll be assigned a more comfortable post with the lab assistants. I learned his mother was Canadian, but his father was Brazilian, and that if we are lucky with our ration, request that he'll make us some Brazilian food, like his father used to cook. Of course, we'll also have to eat Jig's dinner with Doyle first. Finally, I pushed and asked about the whole operation again. And do you see this gauge here? I want you to at least brush by it once a day. If it's making these normal oscillations, then that's fine. Now, if you ever see it start flashing, red and beeping, that's also fine, and please let me know about it. However, if it ever goes flat, run to your dorm and let us know on the radio. Yeah, for sure. I'll keep an eye on it. But listen, I really just want to know what we're even doing here. Like, what's going on? He gave me an odd side eye. You wouldn't understand if I told you everything and be grateful for that. I'll just say a well of something was discovered here. A well of something that doesn't make sense but is very useful if extracted carefully. He was very deliberate with his words. Don't ask any more questions about it. Just be afraid of it. Okay? The last fellow you're replacing made the mistake of being curious. What happened to him? I was expecting silence, as if Lucas had realized he shouldn't have told me that. But he replied almost casually, save for the visible concern on his face. He fell in. There was an issue with the seal at the pump. Doyle was asleep, and I warned him to wait until morning, but he didn't listen. I swear, looking back and reflecting on the way he was talking those last few days, and how odd the malfunction was, I think he opened it deliberately. I rushed out of my dorm when I realized I should have been there to caution him, and I came into the room right as he fell in. Lucas had stopped completely and was giving the floor a 1,000-yard stare. He got quieter. He was stiff as a board and staring straight down into the depths. This terrifying but beautiful glow was coming out of it, and he just leaned over and fell through. Lucas's eyes darted across the various terminals and gauges in the room with us. I managed to activate the subterranean seals, as he should have done in the first place to make repairs. But the numbers have been very different since then. Almost organic. I warned the company to halt operations for a few months, but they just ordered Doyle to fix the seal, and they ordered me to run everything back up. He stared back at me. It made me uncomfortable. Watch out for anything unusual, okay? We have to keep this place running. I'm not sure what would happen now if we didn't keep the pressure regulated, but just keep a watch out for my job's sake. But really for all of us. He was still staring through me with his dehydrated bug eyes, and then his face suddenly popped back into reality. Has Doyle explained the living arrangements to you? I just realized you may not know what I meant by dorms. No, he didn't. Well, come on then. I'll show you. Besides, I've made my rounds and it's getting late. It's time to eat. I grabbed my bags and followed Lucas to the back of the building. I hope I didn't make it sound like it was a very large building, compound, or outpost. I'm not really sure what to call it. I'll just call it a base. The base itself consisted of only the main drilling room, a diagnostic room, data chamber as Lucas liked to call it, a supplies room, and the room with the main generator and fuses. I was able to follow Lucas around for so long, however, because each room had at least 5 different gauges he took long, scattered notes on. The data chamber itself had at least 30. I never counted them all. At the back of the base, I put my heavy coat back on, and we went outside and across the thin bridge into a smaller building. When we stepped inside, we found Doyle had already begun cooking dinner. They explained these were our dorms. We had a shared kitchen and living area, but we had separate bathrooms. I'd dealt with worse conditions. It was almost cozy, really. Doyle made us some kind of spicy chicken soup with spaghetti noodles. Our rations were being delivered in a few days, so we had to get creative with what we had left. We ate and talked about life in the Arctic wastes. After dinner, we smoked cigarettes and played rummy together, and I tried getting them to open up more. but I quickly realized even they didn't have much information for me. Lucas headed out first, said he had to send his report in. Me and Doyle played a game of chess. He beat me badly, but he was a good sport about it, and I tried a couple more times to get some more info. What's the creepiest thing you've seen out here? Lucas seemed worried about the machines. Are you? Every time he either grinned and didn't reply, or he just waved his hand. I started to get the feeling I was asking him to talk about things he was trying not to worry about, so I quit. He showed me around the dorms a little bit more. There was a closet with first aid supplies, and we had some old movies and NES games for killing free time. If I wanted books or anything like that, I'd have to request it. He finished his tour at my room. And this is where you'll be sleeping. Cozy, eh? Yeah, thanks. The room was basic, but the bed was clean and the blankets were thick. It had an alarm clock on a small nightstand, an oak armoire, and then I finally realized it had a solid metal door. It finally dawned on me to ask why the rubber living arrangements were so strange. Hey Doyle, why are the dorms separate from the building? And what's with the metal doors? I don't know, to protect against radiation or something. Don't worry about it, B. And then, as casually as you would hand someone a towel, he opened the armoire and handed me a shotgun. Lucas requested them, but the only way you'd ever be hurting for it is if a polar bear broke in. I was flabbergasted. Thanks. He left, and the door made a satisfying, cold chunk. I remember it was hard to sleep that first night. So much had just happened. I had a whole new job, new coworkers, a new place to live, something unknown and dangerous being pumped out below me, and all the 50-something other odd specifics and circumstances. And then, there I was, in a cold, sterile cell of a room with a shotgun, trying to make sense of it all. I did sleep that night eventually, and I got better at getting over everything. Life at the base was straightforward and uncomplicated, for me anyways. It took some time to learn the new machinery and the syntax on the terminals, but after a couple weeks I got the hang of it. It was a lot like working on the rigs. You forced yourself to get over the looming sense that if one thing goes wrong, you're dead or injured. And at least here the danger was a little interesting. I was there, at the base, for just 2.5 months, and I was told it would take at least 2 years to pay off my debt. I'm not sure if recent events will lower or raise that time, but I suppose we'll see. It all went down at the end of my short time there, but there were some instances of note before then, I suppose. I began to have the same dream every night, floating across a thick purple ocean with sparks of blue light overhead, illuminating odd twisted creatures floating around me. I tried to brush these dreams off, but then the little things around the base kept me on an ever-sharpening edge. On smoke breaks with Doyle, I noticed there was no wildlife around the base, but the ocean life was very active. Fish would wash up on shore constantly, and whales would constantly surface close to us. I asked Doyle about it once, but he just ignored me and kept smoking. Lucas was right about the data. Most of the time it was without note, and the digital notes that accompanied them were rhythmic and bland. But suddenly the beeps would quicken and begin to sound like some low-pitched wailing, like a whale's call or a dying cat. There was also Lucas. I liked him quite a bit, but if you didn't stop him, he'd start theorizing all these terrible things that were about to happen or happening with the substance below, and he'd always mutter something like, "I'm not so sure we should have messed with something beyond our scientific understanding." Still, though I was somewhat disturbed, Life was straightforward at the base, and I got close to Doyle and Lucas, or as close as I could to such an odd pair. Doyle was quiet, but I enjoyed our smoke breaks and the hopeless competition of trying to beat his record on an NES game called Ghosts and Goblins. Lucas was strange, but beneath his spastic intelligence I could see a kind man. Also, we did end up getting some slack from the ration requests, and they sent Lucas the ingredients he needed to make pão de queijo. I think the only unique one was tapioca flour. It was really good. I miss Lucas, and it disturbs me to think about him. I remember just a couple days before it happened, he said something very concerning to me. You know, Cole, I really hope we get out of here soon enough. If I get assigned to a nicer lab, like I know I will, I'll put in a request for you to have a job there with me. A bodyguard or something. Or maybe you could have a nice job in one of those massive warehouses they have. We just gotta keep it up, keep a watch out. We won't end up like the last crew. I was smiling about the prospect of working with Lucas in a fancy government lab. But his last words hit me. I'd been under the assumption we were the first crew this whole time, and not the successors to some tragedy. There was a crew before us. Lucas just nodded at me with his bug eyes. What happened to them? I wish I knew, Cole. When I got here, they just told me there was an incident. And when I, as nervous as you are now, asked what happened, they just told me not to be negligent, and I wouldn't have anything to worry about. He closed the distance between us, and was uncomfortably close. I'll tell you this, though. The whole base smelled like bleach and cleaner, like they had to scrub every inch of it down. If you look behind some of the machinery and below the keys on the keyboard where they wouldn't have cleaned, sometimes you find dried blood. He scurried off after saying that, and I got the impression he'd been wanting to say it for a while. My dreams had intensified slowly. By this point, I had already assumed these dreams were of the well below us, and against my rational doubts, I really began to assume they were caused by some unknown psychic force. The liquid I floated in, and the creatures around me, slowly night by night, became restless. That sea of darkness was almost boiling with anticipation, and these maddening creatures around me were howling and contorting in such a gross fashion. I could swear I could hear their bones grinding against each other, and the noises that came from their mouths, if you can call such disturbing orifices mouths, will be with me for the rest of my life. I became aware of myself as well. I wasn't some invisible spectator floating along. No, I was one of them in my dream, but whatever form I was assuming was greater. The things around me feared me, and they were in such anticipation for what I was about to do. The final night before it all, I remember in my dream, when the noises and chaos around me were long past unbearable. I looked up and saw a metal hatch. It had the company's logo. I felt I was about to pass through it, but I woke up. That day, something was wrong, and we could all feel it. I didn't believe that Doyle's face could show fear, but the wear lines had shown through, and his eyes were squint and bloodshot. We took more smoke breaks than actual work, and every time, those whales and other marine life were all there. But they weren't agitated. They just circled our island, waiting. Lucas, he was quiet and his eyes were as wide as loonies. He was skittering around the whole base, hunched over and muttering. I was working on one of the filters when he suddenly ran up to me. He looked terrible. Cole, forget all that. Do you remember that monitor I told you to keep checking? Do you? Yeah, man, I forget all this busy work. I need you to watch that monitor for the remainder of the evening. Now." I put down the filter I was holding and rushed out. He yelled back to me, his voice cracking with fear. "If the monitors flat run and tell us, you must remember that goal. Please." I busted into the room, and there was the monitor. It was fluctuating wildly, wilder than it ever had before. I remember standing there in the doorway, staring at it. I only checked my watch a couple times. I was so tense. I was there for at least an hour. I kept hearing Lucas and Doyle shuffle past me, and alerts began to go off all around me. The room I was staring into became a terrifying kaleidoscope of flashing lights and pressurized tubes that were flying loose and wild. After a long, agonizing wait, the monitor began to stutter loudly, finally like the EKG of a heart attack victim. It had just a couple more heavy, loud signals, and then it did nothing. The monitor went flat. I reached for my radio just as it happened, but a loud metallic thud from the main drilling room reminded me to run. I was flying across the base when I radioed, "Lucas, Doyle, get to your dorms." The monitor went flat. I think they responded, but just when I got done with my call, I burst out at the back door. I don't even think I had my coat on. I just booked it across the bridge and into the dorms. I remember glancing to my right for just a moment, and there, on the shore, was a washed-up whale. I stumbled through the kitchen and down the hall, and I pushed that iron door shut as fast as I possibly could. I heard running past my door, "Cole, did you get into your room? I saw your door was closed." The radio screaming up at me like that, I swear it almost did me in. I was still catching my breath. "Yeah, huff, I'm good. Doyle, huff, huff. Yeah, huff. Here." I realized Lucas was the only one who wasn't out of breath. I guess running around the base every day was good cardio. The radio was still on, but me and Doyle just sat there catching our breaths for the next 5 minutes. "What the hell happened?" Doyle answered back. "I was in there, you know, the drilling room. The damn thing blew out the floor. That purple whatever was leaking all over the stuff B." He sighed and his voice dropped. I turned tail, but I swear, looked back and there was an arm coming from below Lucas. God. We didn't speak again for a while, but finally I had to ask, "You all right, Lucas? And what was all that?" "I'm all right, Cole. I was last out, but I'm a good runner. I didn't see whatever it was, but I heard it open the back door right as I got into the dorms. I don't know what it was, Cole. I wish I did. Maybe then I could advise us what to do now. But I don't know." I remember Doyle and Lucas talked things over for a while. I just got lost in my memories of the dreams. I didn't want to sleep another night in that room, and I was terrified to think about what horrible dreams were waiting for me if something didn't manage to bust in here and kill me first. Had they drilled too deep? Drilled too long? Was this inevitable from the moment this reservoir of unknown power was tapped? I don't know. These thoughts, they were ancillary. Really, I just didn't want to die. Not there. Lucas said something that snapped me out of my stupor. "I've already sent an SOS to HQ, but we need to get back out there." "What?" I was afraid the seal would burst, but I didn't ever think the APMS would get fried. It's not a hard fix, but it needs to be done soon. What happens if we don't? Can't we leave it for a couple days while HQ gets back to us? Lucas explained in simple terms that once a reservoir of this substance was tapped, it had to be heavily regulated, and normally an AMPS, automated pressure modulated system, took care of it. If it wasn't repaired within, at most, 12 hours, we'd be blowing up with the base. Not to mention exposed to that substance. I'll do it. Doyle said it with an emotionless, cold tone. I guess it took him a bit, but he'd found his composure. Again. Listen, Doyle. I'm the fastest runner. Replacement part's heavy, said it. Listen, B. I can keep cool, better and all that. Just let me handle it. There was some arguing, and I was surprised Lucas seemed genuinely willing to let me and Doyle stay here while he repaired the system himself. I even offered, and I was serious, but Doyle was adamant. Besides, his door was closest to the entrance. We were going to wait a couple hours, and then Doyle was going to head out. I wish we'd talked during those last 2 hours. I wish I'd have finally tried to get Doyle to tell more about himself. And maybe it was better he didn't. But still, I wish I learned more about Lucas's family. I wish I told them how much I'd come to enjoy their company. And though it was an odd job that wasn't good for the mind, they made it enjoyable, but I didn't. We all three just sat there holding our breath, waiting. 8 words were spoken in those 2 hours. I spoke the first 6. We're going to be okay, guys. Doyle had the last 2. We'll see. Time ran out, and it was time for Doyle to get it over with. We asked him to keep his radio on the whole time, and he did. He put on his coat, grabbed his shotgun, and opened the door. I had a horrible feeling that as soon as he'd opened the door, we'd hear some demonic howling and Doyle's screams. But there was just the slow metallic grind of the opening door, and Doyle's cautious breath. Okay, nothing's here. From now on out, I don't want y'all to speak unless I call, eh? Got it. Of course. He passed through the rest of the dorms, and we heard the sharp, cold wind blowing through the microphone. Other whales washed up. The snow on the bridge was crunching under his feet, and I was beginning to become so tense I could barely breathe. I'm sure I didn't even blink the whole time. We heard the door open. He didn't say anything, but his breath had quickened as soon as he entered the building. It must have looked awful. From there, it was, I counted, 13 minutes of slow footsteps, sometimes footsteps on something that sounded wet and thick. Finally, we heard careful work begin. Another 6 minutes later, and a satisfying chunk was heard through the radio, followed by whirring. The AMBS was working again. Doyle put in a few inputs, and then we heard him turn around to leave. I was feeling hopeful at this point. If he'd gotten through all that, surely he could be lucky enough to get back to the dorms. An obnoxiously loud buzzer suddenly rang out, and an auto voice followed it. Amps. System restored. Pressure de-escalation at 50%. Whatever was there in the base with him. Suddenly it busted something open and started howling. I don't even know if howl is the right word. It would be better described as the conjoined moaning of a man and some alien marine creature beyond rationality. You could tell, even over the radio, it was getting closer, and it was getting closer fast. Doyle began to run. He was pushing it, and his boots hitting the floor sounded like claps of thunder over the radio. But that howl was close behind and getting closer, all the way out the building, scrambling across the bridge and crashing through the front door of the dorms. It was getting closer. He must have been in the kitchen, and I could barely hear it through my door. No, help. His radio was thrown through the air, and the feed turned to static as it made impact. Lucas was crying out. Doyle, hold on. Lucas, wait. Too late, he cut his feed, and I heard him run across the hall and past my door, cocking a shotgun. I was pressing my ear against the door frame, more so trying to push my ear through it, and I heard him get to the kitchen, scream, get a shot off, and turn around to run back to his room. Caution had left me, and I turned around and grabbed my shotgun and I ran for the door. As I did, it got Lucas. Whatever it was had caught up to him. I heard him screaming in a way I didn't know men could scream, and there were so many wet, loud thuds against my door, even after he died. Whatever that thing was, it was still howling, and it was right outside my door. After a while, the sound of it ripping and smashing flesh apart had died down. I couldn't hear anything at first, but I cautiously pressed my ear against the door once more. I heard shuttered, slow breathing. I just backed away slowly and sat on my bed, shotgun towards the door. Once again, I didn't hear anything for a while. Of course, I was still tense, but I was hoping this was how it would be until HQ arrived. But then it started. Tap, tap, tap. It was tapping on my door. This violent abomination which had just slaughtered my two friends was knocking on my door like a cat asking for food. I was shaking then, violently shaking. Tap, tap, tap. The walls seemed to be closing in around me, and I realized, too late, I wasn't breathing. I overcorrected and tried to catch my breath too much. My head started spinning and I dropped the shotgun on the bed with me. Tap, tap, tap. Things were getting fuzzy around me and I was choking on air. I heard that monstrosity tapping away as I faded into darkness. It was a short dream after that. I saw myself with multiple twisted arms, dragging the corpses of my two friends back through the base. Though by that point, only a broken spine and some stubborn organs were left. There were so many whispers around me that I couldn't hear before, telling me of a new world, a planet of unending chaos and therefore equality. In this world, there would be no gods and no devils. It would just take time. All these dark omens I continued to hear as I lowered myself back down the seal, bodies in tow. I awoke to the sound of my metal door opening, and I began screaming, but on the other side, I saw men in hazmat suits pointing at me. One of them was even laughing. I faded back out of reality, though, thankfully, the nightmares were over. I didn't dream after that. I awoke again, being flopped down into the back of a van, surprising the man who laid me there. "Oh, hey, I thought you'd be out for a few more hours. Feeling any better?" "Where am I?" "We're sending you back to HQ, gotta tell you, son. You better be grateful you weren't awake to see all that mess in there. I mean, there was every part of the body everywhere. Know what I mean? In the same spot there was brain matter, a tooth, and... Oh, there you go. Hold on, pal. I got you." I passed back out again. I finally awoke, for good. Back at the headquarters, the higher-ups were still chattering over the pipe failure, and they barely noticed I was there. Someone had a little empathy for me and directed me towards some facilities where I could get myself together to some degree. I showered, changed, and ate, but I barely remembered it. I was still in shock, I suppose. Maybe I still am. I came back out to the same worried but shockingly casual discussion. One of them pointed to me and even suggested I would be a good candidate for the next crew. But then the same man from before argued that I'd been through enough and that I should be allowed the option. After that, he kindly put his hand on my shoulder and told me that head on home and get some rest, that they'd contact me in the next couple of weeks. As I was walking out the door, one of them, one who looked barely interested, left me with a note. "Don't forget those NDAs, boy. know would believe you, but you don't want to get yourself into trouble, eh? I stormed out, and here I am. I didn't renew my lease as I thought I'd be working at the base for a long time, so I'm staying with a friend. I filled him in on some details, but just enough to know what to do if I disappear. There's no making sense of things. What can I gain from all of this? Fear, that's all. I don't know what to do now, and this is still a bad option, but I want to do something. If this is the last you all hear from me, then just watch out for special jobs from corporate overlords and stay away from Arctic research bases. Her name was Celeste. It all started with the one question that has bothered me almost my entire existence. Why? Why did he do it? What made him? My grandmother forbade I go see him. My brother Vincent had his own version of events, and all I have is a vague memory of the day it happened. I was only 6 years old. What could push a man to such an act? What could push anyone to do that? The day I turned 18, I decided to go see my father and finally ask him. I didn't need anyone's permission anymore to go to Rikers Island. I woke up early that morning. Grandma was already making breakfast. Vincent was gone as usual. He's barely ever home. I don't like any of his friends. She wished me a happy birthday and made me an omelet. She felt something was off, but I played it cool. I knew if I told her, she'd lock the door on me. She was that serious about it. I hopped on a bus and got to Rikers within an hour. They had me waiting about another hour until I finally saw him. He looked completely different than I imagined. He came and sat down in front of me. I picked up the phone with only one question on my mind. He acted like I wasn't even his son. After what he did, I didn't feel like I was either. First thing he said to me was, "Why did you come? Maria sent you here. She was never too smart." At first, I'll be honest, I got up. I wanted nothing to do with him. But then, something made me sit back down. "Why? Why did you do it?" I demanded. He replied with, "Son, nothing I can say will make it better." I asked him again, "Why did you take my mother away from me?" This is when he simply handed me a small red leather diary. "You had a sister," he quipped to me, which I refused to hear at first. How could I believe anything he said? "You still haven't answered my question," I said. "Her name was Celeste," he shot back. "She was your sister." After that, he got up and left. I was fuming. Not only did he not answer what I wanted to know most, he passed on the little red book that would be the start of a very troubling time in my life. I came home that night after doing my evening shift at Taco Tuesdays and hopped on my Xbox. Grandma made some rice and chicken. Even Vincent came back and had some. His jacket was torn up. He had some blood on his pants. He was acting very strange. Grandma went to bed, and so did he, and eventually I got curious and opened the diary. The first thing I saw was her name, Celeste. Her entry started as any kid's. Drawings of dinosaurs, dolls, all kinds of animals, and a few diary entries. Completing a science project and receiving an A+. Finding a baby sparrow fallen from a nest. Fun days in the park with Mom and Dad. Until something changes page after page. Celeste writes, "Someone is watching me. And he's in my room every night. He scares me. He says bad things to me." The pages that followed were even more unsettling. They were full pages, heavily inked sketches of a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat. I put the diary back into my backpack and went to bed that night, thinking about it all. I couldn't fall asleep for hours, until I finally did. Only, it felt like just a moment before I was wide awake again. I couldn't move. My arms, my legs, my entire body, frozen. The only thing I could wiggle were my eyes. Grandma was out cold in her bed. Vincent was passed out as well. I felt a chill enter the room, and with it, a darkness started creeping in from the hallway and into the bedroom, covering every inch of the room. All I wanted at this point was for this to end, but I had no control. I knew I wasn't sleeping. I knew this was no dream, and that's when I saw him. He was standing right there in the doorway. I could only see his silhouette. His eyes glimmered under his hat. He made his way closer to me, almost hovering. I could not move a single muscle. I was overtaken by fear, a dreading, engulfing sensation of doom. All your fault. His cold, bitter voice echoed in the room. You did this, he proclaimed as he reached his finger out to me. Suddenly, I could feel a loss of breath. I couldn't breathe no matter how hard I tried. I felt an insurmountable pressure on my chest. I felt that this was the end of my life, until I looked to my right and saw her standing there beside me. Her eyes glimmered just like his. Her stance was crooked, her face that of a broken porcelain doll, cracked and tormented. I could not believe what I was seeing with my very own eyes. That's when she uttered, "Remember me now," in her childlike, distant voice. Then everything went black. I woke up the next morning standing in the kitchen. Grandma was worried. For me, she told me I was sleepwalking, and she didn't want to wake me. The first thing I did was go out and throw the diary into a dumpster. I went to work my shift, came back 8 hours later, to find the diary right at my front door, waiting for me. I think I went to hell. 150 American is a fair ask for such a rare piece of literature. The old man clung to the book like it was a coveted artifact, and I had just asked him to give it away for nothing. It was a dusty place, and the scent of old unread books clung to the air. I had never been to this particular bookstore before. In fact, I had never seen it until today, when the sign caught my attention, and I chanced to peek inside. The books sat on rotting shelves and small piles on ancient, dilapidated tables. I had roamed for over an hour as I read spines and flipped open covers. That was when I found it. It appeared to be bound in dark leather, no title written on the cover or the spine. When I opened it, I felt this strange sense of foreboding, like what I was looking at was something I wasn't meant to see. The front page was blank, save for some old water stains. The paper didn't feel normal. It was thicker, softer, and almost like fabric. As I flipped through the pages, I was greeted with strange diagrams and arcane symbology. Pushing further in, there were stories about men and women who had experienced wild and terrible things. For a work of fiction, it was incredible. So, I brought the piece to the strange old man huddled at the counter, murmuring to himself. He was ancient, sallow skin, much like the parchment of these books, with a hooked nose that almost curved fully in on itself. His eyes sat sunken deep into his skull, while quivering, wrinkled fingers slowly turned the page of a book I couldn't visibly see when I placed my intended purchase on the counter. He looked at it, eyes wide as saucers, as though even he didn't realize he had it in this vast collection of ancient literature. His gnarled fingers curved around the dome and pulled it quickly toward himself. When he spoke, It was like he was trying to clear the cobwebs from his own voice. That was when he made his offer. "Rare, is it?" I shot back. "It's in deplorable condition. The pages are deeply water damaged. Some even feel like they've absorbed a small flood. For something so treasured, you certainly didn't bother to provide ample care for it. I'll pay no more than 25 for such a damaged piece." I shot back. Negotiation, especially for such rare and exotic pieces, was something I did well. "Do you even know what it is you are buying?" "The power of such a book. The water damage you claim to see is the blood of those who've read this before you. Those soft pages, the skin of a beast beyond our understanding, flayed and stitched into these pages. The book itself is a living, breathing organism that feeds on the greatest folly we as human beings possess, the thirst for knowledge, the desire to know more, to know what happens next, to know if we are alone in this vast cosmos. I will take no less than 125. He shot back. I had to admit, it was quite the sales pitch. The old man had likely been playing the game far longer than I, but I wasn't about to give him such a simple victory. "If it's such a powerful relic, then you wouldn't be willing to part with it at all. A fascinating story, old man. But perhaps you should stick to your books instead of trying to write new tales off the cuff. $50. No more." He smiled, thin and cracked lips curving into a crescent. "Like I said, the book feeds. It will find its way back here when it is done with you. The price is really just a part of the game. It's already yours." He relented. Until now, he had been clutching the book like a child would a favorite toy. But when he said this, he placed it back on the counter and slid it my way. 50 American then, he stated, holding out his hand. I had expected the game of negotiation to continue on longer than this, but he had given up so readily. Surprised and a little disappointed, I paid the man what he asked and left with my prize. I was eager to read the book, more eager to study the symbology I had seen written on the pages when I had skimmed through them. When I made it home, I had made sure to gather a few notebooks to keep my notes accurate, and I brought the book into my ritual room. My father had died several years ago, and he never approved of my interest in the occult. He had said it was an unhealthy obsession, and that I'd find myself digging up some relic that would result in my untimely end. Knowing what I know now, I wish I had listened. Perhaps I wouldn't have chosen to use my inheritance to build this accursed place. The room itself was small, 10 feet by 10 feet of sandstone brick, with pillars erected to help maintain a completely arbitrary series of archways that encircled the center, leaving an open place on the floor for the drawing of ritual circles and arcane symbols, something I had hoped I'd be able to do with this newly acquired book, setting the dome on a small lectern. I opened it and began to flip through the pages, trying to find something interesting within its pages. Strangely, I found what I sought almost immediately, as if the book knew I wanted something that I could utterly engross myself in. A ritual titled Boon of the Traveler. According to the book, it would take me where I was destined to go. It was a promising lead, so I took it. Carefully, I took the chalk I had saved from a pouch and began to draw out the symbols on the pages in an arcane circle. I recited the words, which to my surprise were written in English. Another red flag I chose not to see. I don't know what I expected. If I had planned on my meddling with the forces unknown actually working, I certainly would have exercised far more caution. But when I finished drawing the symbols and reciting the mantra, something happened. I can't quite explain the feeling, but there was a flash. Blinding light filled the room, and I felt myself being pulled by the midsection into what I can only describe as television static. It was that strange pins and needles feeling, but I felt it across my body. Before I had the chance to even consider what was happening, I fell flat on my face. The ground was cold, almost like concrete. As I pulled myself away and checked for any sort of major injury, I gave my surroundings a once-over, and I certainly wasn't in the ritual room anymore. This place was flooded with cool fluorescent lighting. The ground was what appeared to be a single solid slab of concrete, while the walls were slate gray with a series of hallway cutouts. I felt like I was in one of the most depressing office buildings I'd ever seen. Fortunately, my fall hadn't resulted in anything more than a bruised ego. So, I collected myself and picked a hallway, wandering along the drab walls and looking for anything that might tell me where I had found myself. The hall seemed to stretch on endlessly. Every now and again I'd find a simple white metal door, but when I attempted to open it, I'd find it locked. Knocking never elicited a response, so I'd continue to wander. Though the hall dragged on, there were points where it would eventually break and lead me down another series of corridors with another series of locked doors. The thing that unsettled me the most about this place was the loneliness. I was in what could only be described as some sort of massive compound, and there was never a single soul or other individual to be found. Only the echo of my footsteps against the concrete and jiggling sound of every door I attempted to open. On and on I wandered, never finding an opening that would lead me out of this maze of doors and monochrome halls. There were many times I felt I had walked in circles, but I had no chalk anymore. I had nothing to mark where I had been. It had to have been hours of this aimless travel. I was growing tired, and I was getting hungry. At some point I had taken to calling out, trying to find any source of life that wasn't my own, but no one ever responded. Defeated, I slumped against one of the cool gray walls and stared at the ceiling. Lost, are we? The voice shook me from my defeated stupor, and I clambered up against the wall looking for the source. There, not 5 feet from my person, was a man. He was pale, wore a simple white shirt and black slacks. The most striking thing about him was that his face was perfectly hairless. No eyebrows, no facial hair, and nothing on top of his head. He blinked a pair of cool blue eyes and maintained this professional smile that made me uneasy. "Where did you come from?" I demanded of him. His smile remained as he motioned to one of the many doors. "My office, of course. I heard you shouting and grew concerned. Not many get lost in this place anymore." "What is this place?" I asked curiously, thankful to have a comrade in the monotony. Hard to say, really. An access point? A business? Who knows? I just work here after all. Then, what job is it you do? "Oh, a little of this, a little of that. I haven't done an onboarding in a long time, though. So, I suppose I'm glad you arrived when you did." It was growing dull. What was growing dull? Every answer he gave was this vague half-response. Nothing explained anything. "I think you'll learn soon." He motioned to a nearby door and nodded. "You should try that one. Pretty sure it's open." Before I could respond to argue, he turned on his heel and disappeared behind another door. I ran to it, trying to pull it open so I could ask more questions, but the door locked behind him. leaving me alone in this strange and nightmarish place once again. I growled under my breath, looking to the door he had pointed out and marching toward it. I tried the handle, and just as he said, it turned for me. Relieved to finally be able to escape this odd limbo, I pushed into the space beyond the door. I found myself back in my father's home. The manor was quiet, save for the faint sound of beeping medical equipment. It was unsettling. After my father had died, I had all of the equipment that was being used to care for him returned. I didn't want to think about those tools that were being used to keep him with us artificially for so long after his accident. I didn't want to consider them, just as I had never wanted to see him in such a state. After his injuries, I had abandoned him, left him to die alone in this massive place, returning only when I got the call of his passing. I followed the sounds of the machines right to his old bedroom, one I had sealed off after his death, forbade anyone from entering. Testing the door, I found it unlocked and slowly pushed it open. My father's massive 4-poster bed sat in the middle of the room, curtains drawn. I could see tubes and medical equipment surrounding the bed as I nervously approached. The pained sound of shallow breathing resonated from behind those curtains, only amplifying my fears. I fought them every step I took, morbid curiosity winning over self-preservation. Pulling back the curtain, I saw him. My father lay in the bed, breathing raggedly as machines did most of the work for him. His body was covered in bandages, many of them browning from the treated wounds beneath. There were parts of his face that were uncovered, parts where I could see the burns. He turned a milky eye in my direction, and I nearly stumbled back, barely able to hold in the contents of my stomach. "What's wrong, son?" I heard his broken voice rasp. "Can't bear to look upon your old man anymore. Just like you ignored me all those years ago, left me to die. After you did what you did. I haven't the slightest what you're talking about." I spoke, voice quivering the whole time. "Don't you?" he rattled back. "Your little games in the pool house, the candles and the animal blood, the stupid fucking rituals." The machines beeped faster as I turned away, trying to run from whatever this monster wanted to reveal. But I heard them. I heard the tubes shuffle, the squeak of medical wheels. "You did this." I heard him growl. Then I felt his charred fingers upon my shoulder, still warm. "Your petulance, your obsession." My breath left me as he spun me to face him fully. I could smell the sickly sweet scent of burned flesh, and his bandages fell away, leaving me to look upon my father in all his glory. From head to toe, his flesh was charred. His eyes were sickly white orbs in his blackened face. Loose flaps of skin flared where his nose once was, and a pair of holes were all that remained of his ears. Any flesh that wasn't directly attached to bone was gone, burned away in the fire all those years ago. I wasn't home that night. I was with a group of friends. I tried to justify what had happened, but he was right. "Oh yes, your little group of cultists who followed you around like puppies, wanting to suckle from the teat of your money. You left the candles burning. You left the kerosene on the counter. It was your negligence, your stupidity that caused the fire. I was so worried about you, son. So worried. I ran into that building to save your life, and it cost me my own. What thanks do I get? Months of skin grafts and medical treatments, while my only son wouldn't even bother to visit. You left me alone, left me to die." The room grew warmer as he growled, and I could see the smoke coming from the machines. I tried to run, to escape the coming conflagration, but my father's grip was firm on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," I begged. "Please, Father, don't do this to me." "Do what?" he demanded, turning me to face the sparking medical equipment. "Leave you to feel what I have felt, the rejection, the pain, the loneliness. This is what awaits you, son. This is the answer to your question. Rejoice. You know what comes after." I struggled against him, but his grip remained firm. The equipment sparked again, catching some container of medicine. When it did, the medication sparked and burst into flame. Before I could even scream, the entire room was suddenly engulfed in an inferno. I prepared myself for the flames, for death to take me, and I felt their heat. I felt my skin begin to crack and jar as the flames burned away nervous tissue. But when I finally opened my mouth to scream, I was in the hallway once again. "Lost, are we?" I heard the voice of the man from before, and I quickly rushed to my feet, the terror still present on my face. "Is this hell? Where am I? Who are you?" The strange bald man simply smiled at me. "You must have just had your first onboarding," he'd say with that same calm smile. I saw my father. He tried to kill me. Oh dear, that must have been quite the experience. I'm sorry that happened. Perhaps now you understand, though. His voice grew darker as he spoke those words. "Understand what?" I asked, the sweat from my last encounter now beginning to mix with the sweat from this one. "Some things are best left alone. Some doors best left locked. Some books best left unread." He'd looked to another door that slowly creaked open. "Go home," he said plainly. "Don't come back here until you are meant to. Get rid of the book." He'd motioned to the door before I change my mind and decide you need more training. I looked to the door, then to the strange man. I didn't need to be told twice. I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't want to experience this nightmare any longer. I ran to the door and rushed through. I awoke on the floor of the ritual room. One of the runes I had drawn in chalk had been smudged. Looking to the book, I breathed a heavy sigh of relief and closed it. A scent seemed to carry on the wind, some sort of cooked meat. It made me shiver as I rushed back up the stairs of the manor, sealing the ritual room and locking it. That night I visited my father's grave for the first time. I apologized sincerely for my selfishness, and the next day I sought out the old bookstore again, only to find the old man waiting. "I told you," he said with a wry smile. "The tome of the traveler always returns to me." I didn't care to ask more or demand a refund. I wanted the book gone, and he gladly took it back. The whole incident occurred 2 years ago. The ritual room was turned into a private viewing room for more light-hearted films. I donated a hefty portion of my inheritance to charity and started attending church. Anything, I've told myself, to avoid going back to that place, because I think I know what it was, and I never want to see it again. There is a faceless man that smiles at me through my window. There is a light flashing outside my window. It flashes in patterns, and it never turns off or stops. It is methodical. It is the only light outside my window. There is a man that looks at me through my window. He's smiling, but he does not have a face to smile with. I live on the 3rd floor. He keeps smiling. I am not sure where I should begin my story, but I will tell it. For today the man was not at my window. There is knocking at my door. I think it is the man. and I think he wants to greet me finally, with his blank slate face that somehow smiles. There is no more ground outside of my window. I no longer live on the third floor, as there are no more floors at all except for the one in my apartment. There is static outside my window. I had a cat once, I think. I also think that the man does not like cats. I do not have a cat. Will you listen to my story? Will you hear it? Will you save me? Can you save me? I am not sure. For now, I sit and ride my finality. For now, I listen to the knocking of the man without a face who smiled. For now, I will tell you what remains. I decided to take a break from college at the beginning of the year. It was not a sporadic decision, but a decision that I made to heal after putting myself in the hospital. It was my own choice, one that a lot of people didn't really understand, and I didn't have the capacity to explain. I think I was just tired. I think I've always been tired. My family was beside me through most of it, though I lived alone. My dad ended up getting me a cat. Her name was Calypso, and she became my only comfort while getting through each day. I spent most days just at home and going to work. I didn't go out anymore, and I focused on trying to get better. I thought I was getting better. Until that wretched bar. Until he came. A few weeks ago, I decided that I would go out. It was a rare night where I decided that I wanted to go somewhere and try to have some fun like a normal 21-year-old. I decided to go grab a drink at some bar in town. The bar I went to was one that I hadn't heard of before, but it was the first one that popped up when I searched for bars nearby on Google. It had decent reviews, so I chose it. The first thing that struck me as odd heading there was the location. It was a little out of the way, still in town, but not really near any other buildings. I brushed off my doubts and continued there. The bar wasn't very big. None of the bars in my town were, though, as it's a smaller town. So once again, I ignored the weird feeling in my gut. The building was brick, the color like drying and cracked blood. Places looked like they had been hastily fixed with concrete, the random gray patches standing stark against the dark brick. The windows looked yellowed, though it could have been from the warm lights coming through them from the inside. There were vines creeping up the side, tethering it down and looking like the earth wanted to swallow it. Maybe it did. Walking to the door, I didn't really pay attention to how there weren't any cars or people outside around the place, nor did I notice that there wasn't any sound leaking out of the frail and shadowed building. I wish I had paid attention, though inside was normal. There was music playing, a dance floor, and a pretty nice amount of people given the out-of-the-way place the bar was at. I, at the time, did not realize none of the people had faces, that the way they moved was jittery and odd, like someone trying to puppet a heavy sack of grain, or a wax figure trying to move after melting its joints. I sat down at the bar, and a bartender came up to me to ask for my order. He had a face, at least I believe he did. My mind is not the same as it once was. I told him the first drink off the top of my head, and waited. That was when he came in. The air shifted in the bar, and my head pounded like all of the blood rushed there. I was frozen, and did not want to look at whoever walked in. My gut told me that if I looked, it would be over. I wish I listened. Footsteps made their way towards me, the sound loud even amidst the bumping music playing. Or maybe it wasn't playing at all. Maybe it never was. The footsteps stopped behind me, and he said something, but I did not comprehend it. It was like my brain was filtering it out. There was a ringing in my ear, and static behind my eyes. I hadn't even drank yet. Had I? Maybe I had already drank. I turned around. The man's face was static. My vision was swimming. Colors were blending. And suddenly there were flashes of an empty old bar, with nothing there but cobwebs, shadows, and the things that lurked in them. I believe he was one of them. The visions were fleeting, and I was back to reality quickly. Or what I think was reality. My current one, at least. The man offered his hand and I took it. The static grew. My head was filled with it. We danced. The song was slow. Or was it fast? A fly lands on my hand. It was hungry for the rot that lingered beneath my skin. I do not know how I ended up back in my apartment, but the man was there. Every time he spoke, flies poured out and the static grew louder, brighter. He left. The flies stayed to keep me company. The next week was a blur, and I am not sure what was reality and what was something he created. Did I ever go to work? Or have I been in my bed the whole time? Has my family come to check on me? Do I have a family? Did I ever have one? The static man came by one day and introduced me to the faceless one. He will watch you until it is your time, the static whispers. My time for what? The end. The beginning. The man started to watch me through my window. I live on the 3rd floor. I did live on the 3rd floor, right? The man watches anyway, smiling with his empty face. There is a persistent light that flickers outside past his left shoulder. It is asking for help. The static man came once more. Calypso, my cat, is gone. I am not sure she was ever here. I do not know if I had a cat. The static man told me it was my time, and the smiling man never came to my window. There is no outside now for him to watch from, so it makes sense. There is knocking at the door. The world has become static, and soon so will I. For now, though, I am what remains. I went cave, exploring with my friend. We found something that wasn't supposed to be there. I don't want sympathy. I just want someone to tell me I'm not crazy. I've run through every explanation: exhaustion, hallucination, gas exposure. But nothing adds up. I know what I saw in that cave. I know what we heard, and more importantly, what we felt. You can say I'm mistaken. That's fine. Just don't tell me it wasn't real. It was my friend Zoe's idea. She's always had a reckless streak. Urban, exploring, off-trail hiking, night diving. I usually talk her down, but this time, I don't know. Something about the way she described the cave made me curious. It's not even on any of the maps, she'd said. A guy on the geology forum posted coordinates before his account went dead. Said the wind didn't blow the same down there. I should have said no. We left early. Just 2 backpacks, headlamps, spare batteries, and a rope line. No cell signal where we were going. The cave entrance was narrow, more of a seam in the rock than a mouth. You had to slide in sideways between slabs of limestone to even reach the chamber. The inside was colder than it should have been. Still air, like nothing moved in or out. So we made a joke about ancient burial grounds. I didn't laugh. There was a dampness to the walls, like sweat, not moisture. The rock was wrong too. It looked like it had been scored with something. Thin, deep gouges, inconsistent in pattern. Not pickaxe marks, not natural erosion. It looked deliberate. We went deeper. The light from the surface was long gone, and all we had was the thin, white cone of our headlamps. The passage narrowed, then opened into a wide chamber. I remember thinking the ceiling looked too high for how far we'd gone down, like we were standing in a space that shouldn't exist. Zoe moved ahead of me, scanning the walls. That's when we found it. A bundle of bones tied with what looked like human hair, hanging from the ceiling by a crude length of sinew. No carvings, no symbols. Just a mass of bones, gently swaying. I whispered, "Zoe, I don't think this is abandoned." She didn't respond right away. When she finally did, her voice was hollow. This wasn't here in the photos. Photos? She hadn't mentioned any pictures before. I didn't ask. I was too focused on the smell that was suddenly thick in the air, like meat left in the sun, but sweeter. That's when I heard it. Something scraping stone. Not close, not far. Somewhere in that massive, impossible chamber with us. I turned, and for a second, I thought I saw something move. Long and thin, almost like a shadow peeled away from the wall and slipped out of sight. Zoe was already backing up. Her face had gone pale beneath the headlamp's glow. I grabbed her arm and whispered, "We need to go, now." She didn't argue. We turned, retraced our steps, but the tunnel didn't look the same. The gouges in the walls were deeper now, fresher, some still wet. Zoe started muttering under her breath. I counted it. I counted the turns. I swear I did. I told her to keep moving, keep the rope line in hand, but when I reached for it, there was nothing. The rope was gone, just a frayed end cut clean. Something had taken it, and it wasn't done with us yet. Zoe was unraveling. Her breaths were fast and shallow, fogging up the inside of her headlamp lens. I grabbed her by the shoulders, more to steady myself than her. "Hey," I said quietly but firmly. "We need to keep our heads. You counted the turns, right? So think, what's next?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "I don't know. I did count them, I swear. 3 right, 2 left, slope downward. But this isn't where we came in." I glanced around. The stone felt tighter somehow, angrier. The air had thickened like the cave was exhaling slowly, and we were breathing in its rot. That smell was stronger now, clotted, sickly sweet. I listened. There, beneath Zoe's frantic breathing. Breathing, not hers, not mine. Something deep, rhythmic. A slow drag in and out, not from any one direction, just around us, embedded in the walls, or beneath them. I shushed her and held my hand out. She went quiet. We both heard it then. Not a growl, not a snarl, just breath, like lungs the size of the room, expanding in time with our fear. I scanned the area. There, look, I whispered. About 10 feet up, there was a narrow ledge. Natural rock slanted inward, like a lip above the tunnel mouth. If we could get up there, maybe we'd get a better view of the layout, or at least feel like we weren't being watched from every direction. I helped Zoe climb first, boosting her from below. Her boots scraped and kicked loose gravel, and I winced with every sound. My turn was harder. My fingers trembled against the sharp stone, my legs aching from tension and cold. But I made it. The ledge was wide enough for us to crouch. Our lights reached further up here. That's when I saw it, a shape just outside the cone of our beams. It was too tall. That was my first thought. Not like a person. like someone had been stretched upright, arms long, joints sharp, body so thin you could see where the ribs nearly pierced the skin. Its back was turned. Pale, scabbed flesh stretched tight over its frame. Its head scraped the ceiling, and it was listening. One long arm curled out and touched the wall, claw tips dragging across it gently, like it was feeling vibrations through the stone. My breath caught. It froze. No sound, no movement. Then its head twisted, not turned. Twisted, the neck bending like a broken branch, until one sunken, pupil-less socket faced our direction. It didn't blink. It didn't move. Zoe made a noise, something between a whimper and a choked breath, and I grabbed her mouth just in time. The thing tilted its head. Its other hand flexed. Claws like carved antler tips scraped together. Click, click, click. Then it sank back into the dark, not walking, melting. The way it moved made me feel wrong inside, like gravity didn't apply to it the same way. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted salt. We sat there for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was minutes. Time felt fake down there. Zoe finally leaned in. Her voice was so quiet I barely heard her. I don't think we found the cave. I think it wanted us to find it. That thought didn't feel paranoid. It felt true. The walls were grooved. The air was still. The bones were arranged. This wasn't some forgotten tunnel. It was a trap, baited with something only the desperate or curious would follow. I pulled out the backup flashlight and checked our gear. Still had a flare. Half a bottle of water. No rope. One knife. We couldn't stay up here. Whatever that thing was, it knew now. We had to move. I started to climb back down when I saw something strange in the rock below. Thin lines in the stone that looked too symmetrical, almost like script. Not in English, not anything I recognized. Dozens of little carvings etched into the ledge just below where we sat, each one a perfect copy of the last. Zoe saw them too. That looks like the markings near the... She stopped herself. Near the bone bundle. We both knew it. Below us, the breathing started again. But this time, it wasn't steady. It was excited. I told Zoe to stay. Don't move. Don't make noise. Don't shine your light unless you hear me call for you. She didn't argue. Just nodded with that hollow, hunted look. Her hands gripped the rock until her knuckles went white. I climbed down from the ledge and slipped into the corridor on the far side, one we hadn't seen before. It felt older than the rest. The walls here were darker, like the stone itself had been scorched, not from fire, from time, or something older than time. My boots crunched something brittle beneath them. I didn't look down. The deeper I moved, the warmer it got. Not physically. That's not the right word. It was like the space remembered heat. A stale, decaying warmth that stuck to your skin like grease. I turned a corner and found another chamber. This one was smaller, oval-shaped. The walls weren't stone anymore, at least not naturally. They were carved into reliefs, figures I didn't recognize, arranged in circles, each with their heads bent toward the center. In the middle of the room was a pit. I don't know how deep it went. My light couldn't reach the bottom, but I could hear it. Something moving down there, slow, wet, rhythmic. It didn't echo. I backed out before whatever was down there noticed me. When I returned to the ledge, Zoe was gone. No blood, no drag, marks, no scuffle, just gone. Except there was a new bone bundle hanging from the rock just below where we had been sitting. Fresh, not skeletal, not cleaned. Something wet still clung to the twine, holding it together. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I couldn't. My body locked up, my mind flooded with one thought that repeated over and over. It took her. My flashlight flickered. Not out, just dimmed. The way a dying memory does in the back of your mind when something older pushes forward. I ran. I don't remember the path I took, only that the cave shifted around me. The same hallway split and doubled back. I saw my own footprints over and over again. And then I didn't. There were no footprints, no dust, just smooth stone, as if nothing and no one had ever walked there before. When I finally collapsed, I was staring up at a patch of sky. Pale morning light filtered through a hole barely large enough to crawl through. Roots hung like fingers. I pulled myself out with everything I had left. I don't remember how I got back to the car, or how I drove. I woke up in my apartment, 2 days later, dehydrated and covered in scrapes. Zoe's things were still in the trunk. She's never been reported missing. No records, no digital footprint. It's like she was erased the moment we stepped into that place. Except, yesterday someone slid something under my door. A strip of pale leather, tied around a bundle of hair. Zoe's. I recognized the braid. There were markings burned into the leather, same as the carvings in that cave. I've spent hours trying to match them to anything. Runic scripts, tribal symbology, ancient languages. Nothing matches exactly, but one symbol keeps showing up. It looks like a figure bent backward over a ring of thorns. Sometimes it's drawn with antlers. Sometimes it has no face. Sometimes it looks like it's smiling. I'm not posting this for clout. I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm posting it because I found something else burned into the inside of the leather. Not in ancient script. In English. 5 words. You were meant to watch. I haven't slept since, and I'm not sure. Should, because sometimes, just before dawn, I hear breathing in the